Hey everybody, this is Smith tuning into TAOTalks. Welcome to Season 1, Episode 6. In today's episode, we talk about doing work, what we do for work. We talk about active work, but we also talk about passive work that is being done when we're being either lazy or when we're resting. We eventually find ourselves in talking about doing the work where we are constantly observing ourselves and what we can do to find meaning and possibly fulfillment in our life. I think you're going to really enjoy this episode. Enjoy. This is TAOTalks. T-A-O. The art of Tao. TAOTalks. The art of exploring life. TAOTalks. The art of being. TAOTalks. Philosophical musing. TAOTalks. Ancient wisdom for modern beings. TAOTalks. The art of understanding. TAOTalks. Universal laws. TAOTalks. Timeless insights. Welcome to TAOTalks. T-A-O. The art of.
Hey, Smith.
How goes?
Life is good. Life is good.
I've been noticing a lot of birds chirping around here, and I feel like I haven't heard that, especially in the fall time and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's like an influx of birds or something like that. I don't know if you hear that in your neighborhood.
I do. I used to pay attention to it a lot more when I worked. During COVID, had to move people outdoors.
Yeah.
So we train in my backyard. And I have an app on my phone called Merlin that records the sounds and tells you what birds
are
around. So there's a time I definitely paid attention to that. There's certain birds that are here year round.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's migratory birds. So springtime, you're definitely going to get a lot more of the migratory birds. And it's a lot louder.
Yeah, it's kind of nice. And I think I'm actually often waking up to it too. It's kind of beautiful.
Yeah, I love it. It's one of the things that I feel really blessed about my house is I back up to a green belt. So in a cul-de-sac. So I'm in a cul-de-sac on a green belt. So there's not a lot of development around my house. There's not houses right behind my house.
Yeah.
So I can go sit in my backyard and be up against nature. And it's reasonably quiet considering I live in the city.
Yeah.
And the birds and just the sounds of nature. It's, I don't want to call it healing because I don't think it's healing so much as restoring. Just feels very restorative to be able to sit and absorb and be a part of that.
Yeah, and not hear like traffic sounds and things like that.
Yeah. Although I still get that every once in a while. I can still hear it off in the distance.
Yeah.
So it's different in the fall because all the leaves drop down, so the sound travels more.
Yeah. Right.
But this time of year, it actually gets really quiet and you can actually hear nature a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. There's like a freeway here and it's relatively high. And so from there, if I'm passing, I get to see the roof and things like that. And so it's like, oh man, that means it goes both ways. I can't see the freeway per se, but definitely I can hear it.
Mm-hmm.
What are we getting into today? Any thoughts on
he's flipping the script on me, throwing it my way. I always come in open because I never know what you're going to ask me.
Yeah.
No, I don't have anything present in mind at the moment, but if something comes up, I'll throw it in the ring.
Yeah. How's it been for you with the basketball seasons winding down and things like that?
It's
been a month now?
Yes.
It's
been about a month, it was like 2 weeks into February, so March, a little over a month.
Yeah.
It's been good. Basketball season's continuous. It's a year-round thing for me. It's different for the kids, but it changes from the season when you have 5 practices a week well, more than that, because I had middle school and high school. That's just 5 practices a week just for the high school, 2 for the middle school. So it's 7 practices a week. 3-4 games a week on top of that.
Yeah.
So just time-wise, when the season ends, all of a sudden, I don't have all of that. But I still run 2 practices a week at the school. And then on Sunday, I open, so really 3 practices a week. So I'm still in the season. And so we're in the off season, which is really, I think, my favorite time of the basketball year. Because it's where we get to work on, I get to work with the kids to develop their individual skills versus building the team skills. And that's really where I'm best at. That's what I do best, breaking down movements, especially with shooting, being able to score, like teaching the kids how to really have fun playing the game, like developing signature moves that they can do in game against competition. And the kids love it, especially the kids that I have. They're just really into it. So it's been good. And this is my 3rd year of kind of running off-season basketball. And when I first started, I had a really small group of kids that would show up every week. And now it's kind of built where I have, good 10, 12 kids who show up every, on a Sunday to come practice basketball and run drills and have fun. So super rewarding. Love it. Yeah. It's a lot slower time just because of the time frame. But basketball is year round. Plus I get to work with my son. It's going to be his last year playing basketball. So it's like a good bonding time for the 2 of us.
The team though, right? Not for...
As a competitive athlete, unless he improves enough over this next year and decides that he wants to try playing in college. I'm sure he'll play intramural clubs in college, but whether he plays on a team, this is next year will probably be his last year. So yeah, and really, it's the last year he's living in my house before he goes off into the world. So it's there's a lot like this. There's a lot of like, I'm really excited about it. It feels really good, and it's also a little bit bittersweet because I know it's the last year. So it's a funny thing because for him it's a new beginning. So everything's the beginning of something, and for me it's the end of something. So, definitely feeling some mourning and loss as I go. I think that's going to get a little more intense as we get to next year.
Yeah. What comes from me to talk about is what we talked about last, I think 2 Fridays ago, work. You want to get into that?
Okay.
You're talking about when you're working versus when you're not working, but when you're not working, you're also kind of working. Because you were experiencing something where you had, per se, free time, and you were just reflecting. In that, is that what I heard?
I remember. I remember vaguely, but work is something.
It was a little while ago, but still, yeah.
Well, it was a little while ago as far as our conversation, but this particular subject is one that I think about quite often. In fact, I was thinking about it just yesterday.
Yeah.
Because I like to play around with what the word work. Like, what does the word work even mean?
It's funny you say that because actually, when I transitioned from school, like grad school, into workforce, I remember actually thinking about shifting my usage of the word job to work. And so it's funny that we're like, oh, like, what does work even mean? But I knew at that time, for me, something was telling me, like, I don't want to use job in my vocabulary, because what I end up doing, I want to be able to think of it as work. Because you can get work, you could do work for X reason, or you can do work for something else, and they all have different outcomes. Some might be not outcome oriented, some work you're supposed to do, and just things like that. Yeah, So it's kind of interesting.
So I think my simple definition of work is something that it's productivity based, right? If I can utilize, I can burn a lot of energy not producing anything, and I would not necessarily call that work. And a lot of people work really hard at not producing much, and it's hard. We call that work, but is it really work? I feel like work is effort that leads to some kind of productive end.
But then you have to define the word productive.
Well, that's where work gets tricky, because it's not the only place that it gets tricky. It gets tricky for me in a number of ways. So I'm going to back up a little bit and talk about the word work more emotionally. Something that I notice is within myself and picked up from culture and society is that there is some emotional aspect to the way we perceive work as suffering, as something we have to do that we don't necessarily want to do. That it is, we have to sacrifice in this way at the expense of, the way how we would prefer doing with our time. We have to do this.
For future,
right?
For status,
future, food, pay rent,
right? Family,
right? And I think that creates a very skewed version of work in which it's more that, or a definition of work in which it has less to do with productivity and it has more to do with suffering. If I'm suffering a whole lot, then I must be working, right? I think there's a little bit of an emotional perspective where we put that into our work, which I think leads a lot of people to work that is not satisfying, that isn't fulfilling, that is grueling and is ultimately just not fulfilling. I think that's probably the big one.
So what you're saying here is that it's like this tendency to associate work with the word sacrifice or the ideology of sacrifice, and really thinking linearly like that is where you then possibly start thinking like, oh, this is not fulfilling to me. Or maybe not just thinking, but feeling also. It's because you're associating with that, the sacrificeness of it.
Right.
But that's just a linear thinking, or that's just one way of thinking, and work could be something more than that.
So
not just that.
Let me play with the word work a little bit. When you rest, are you working?
Mm-hmm.
So, what would be your answer to that?
Definitely biologically, it's working.
Right. So there's process, and
it's like restoring, a lot of regeneration is happening.
Say you worked really, really hard and you are exhausted. Does doing more work in the way that you are doing it lead to better productivity, or does working on rest lead to better productivity?
Mm-hmm.
In which case, would resting be just simply a phase of work?
Right. A necessity.
And so so now I can call rest work.
Right. Or what do you call work, right? Because it's like, then, right. So if
resting leads to better productivity of a particular outcome, then that is quality work.
Or the opposite, where if you're thinking the rest is not work, then during the day work, possibly that's not also work.
Well, I think the bigger part is if I have this emotional attachment that work is this sacrifice, then I might sacrifice rest, which is actually one of the most important qualities of my work that make my work better. I might sacrifice that and continue focusing on the work.
Mm-hmm.
Or when I'm supposed to be resting, I'm just not. I'm staying active. I'm distracting myself. I'm doing other things, but I'm not working on resting. I'm not taking my rest seriously as I am my work, which is then affecting my work, which means I'm not working as well. So, it's like, and rest is something that a great deal of people struggle with. They do not rest adequately in a way that makes them more productive at their work.
I mean, in particular, in the hyper-capitalistic, region of the world that we live in.
I don't know if I'd go to the capital. I think I might turn it to the Puritan.
What does that mean?
I think the big part with the Puritans was a belief that they came into the world in sin. We were already sinful creatures. We were not worthy of God, and we had to work in order to gain the worthiness of God. And then work became the prime,
Is this also then related to the sacrifice?
I would say, yeah. I would say,
Yeah.
very much so.
Yeah.
Work is sacrifice.
Yeah.
And they had law, they laughter, joyousness, entertainment, music were things that were really squashed culturally for the purpose of, we are here to be pure. Like Puritan comes from the idea that we have to be pure for God.
Through work.
And work was a primary mode of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it wasn't necessarily work for the purpose of prosperity. I focus on the Puritans purely, largely from our culture in this country, but there are common threads in other cultures, in other religions, that really go back to a lot of our earliest human stories. And call the story of Adam and Eve, the idea of original sin, which is a very ancient story that goes back before most of our modern religions. The idea of, that we are sinful creatures is inherent in some of our earliest stories, and that spread around the world into a lot. Pretty much most religions have some level of that emotionality within. We are sinful. We have an original sin. We were born unworthy, and we have to prove our worthiness to God in order to make it into the heavenly afterlife, or whatever version that we might have.
I'm not so sure if that was common across different religion and things like that, because I'm learning about something that's even different, and this is this would be even before when a given religion became what it is or something. So I don't know, so I don't know the answer, and in terms of whether all religion have that belief or this thing associated with it, where the Puritans ideology, where we have to we're sinners and we have to prove ourselves to become pure. But regardless of that, I think how, in terms of where we are right now with the work, and resting and productivity, I think we're going into defining productivity.
Right. Well, and I don't know about defining productivity. I have ways of looking at what I consider to be what productivity is. So another word that we can play with is play. Is play work? On some level, I would consider play to be the highest level of work. A level in which we've integrated work so much into a holistic system of who we are that we do it. It's well integrated, and we do it at a level of play. That probably can be unfolded a little bit more. I think play is probably easier to put into a movement. I like thinking about it in terms of specific movement. So when I learn a new movement, when I teach a new movement, the first thing is learning it at a neurological level. Say playing the piano. You teach somebody, they have to learn the chords. And at first, they're awful at it. They can't, their fingers don't hit right. It doesn't sound smooth. You listen to little kids playing the piano and we think it's cute and adorable, but it's not great music. They're not playing music yet. But as they practice, as they put work and effort, they get better. They hone their neurology, it gets smoother. They start to bring in actual music, playing songs. Over time, as they develop greater and greater mastery, they get to where they're playing the music, or they're working the music, and then it can become something that's so well integrated into their system that they're able to play. They're able to go off the script and make their own music as they go. They can bring in more improv, like an improvisation into it.
Yeah.
That's like the highest degree of work, is when you can take something to that level where it's so well integrated that you actually get to play with it. And that can be true of musical instrument. It can be true of, a physical movement, sports, athletics, things like that. But it can also be true of a job, career, what you do for work.
Yeah, it's like you can kind of word it like that's when you're like creative in a sense where you're using that as an instrument, but it's an extension of you, really.
How about embodied?
Yeah.
Where, you said the word job. I like the word job when it is a job. It's like, I have a project. That is the job that I have for today. But it's a fixed thing. I get to the end of it and that job is over, and there is not another, like, then I go to the next job. So job's almost like the list of things that I have to check off in my work. I might have little jobs along the way. But when it comes to the level of how I'm working, I like to think about, how do I get to a point in which I am in a state of play with my work? And it doesn't necessarily mean play in the sense of I'm being joyous and free and flighty or anything like that. Like, I can still be very serious, but be playing in a serious way, or I can be playing in a lightly serious way or a less than serious way. But even when it's serious, like to be able to walk into a session with a client and to be able to quickly move into whatever that client needs me to be in that moment. Say they have something really great going on and they want to, I'm really excited about learning this new thing. Let's really go hard after this thing today. Or, I'm dealing with some difficult things, family, emotional, and it's a little bit heavier. My ability to be able to be playful in that moment, depending on what that client needs, is where I want to be. It's still my work and I take it very seriously, but I need to be able to play with it, to be able to change the music that I thought that I was coming into and be able to sing into a different tune as I need to.
We were talking about this thing of you do work during the day for X amount of hours to then rest, and plausibly you label it as not working anymore, but you're still actively working.
I consider
resting, right?
I consider all work.
There was a thing that you said when we talked in the past where there's even a possibility where someone could not necessarily be resting, but just doing something else that still leads to, it might be actually like really active working and stuff like that, but it's still rest from what they were doing before, like context switching and things like that.
Right. Was that
it's like video game.
Yes, that was the conversation of somebody. I was listening to a podcast and he was talking about, he's a writer.
Yeah.
And so he writes all day long. And the way he takes a break from writing is he goes and plays video games. And how to somebody who's looking from the outside would go, well, how does that rest? How's that restful? Your brain is still very active. You're not actually resting. But video games are so distinctly different in how the brain works from his other work that on some level it actually makes a lot of sense. Although I still think there is another level of rest that's probably required on top of that.
Yeah.
But I would consider that a form of rest. I play video games sometimes. Like there is a restful quality of what it does to very specific aspects of my brain that are constantly active, churning on work, and it disengages from that, and I get a break from those things.
Yeah, I think both of that could be like where you're still very stimulated per se, and then you're saying there's this other level of rest that you would need still working, but that might require you to not have stimulation, external stimulations going into you. Do you think that we can get away with a constant stimulation, but then just keep context switching like that? You go from writing to video game to then like maybe cook, and where I believe that our brain has the capacity to really compartmentalize all of that, to be like, oh, I'm not doing this other thing. Or maybe we'll convince ourselves that we're not doing that, but maybe we are. Like maybe that person is still writing per se, or like this thought is still being marinated while playing video games. And it could be helpful or not. I'm not too keen on how to like define that or label that. But this notion that our brain can like convince ourselves of like, hey, I'm not working, but maybe you are.
So
or compartmentalization of the brain too. It's like, wait, I don't know if we can actually do that, because I know we have different compartments, but they're not like separated. We're just roughly say like, this is the frontal cortex, all that.
I mean, so let me frame it in how I view it for myself. I view the moment I wake up to the moment of it, really 24 hours a day, even when I sleep, I'm working all the time. I'm never not working. Work is something that is just a continuous thing. Now I might be working, actively engaged in very specific projects, or I might be working, actively engaging in rest and restoration. But I take my rest and restoration just as seriously as a work as I do with anything else. And part of the reason I say that I work from just 24/7 is part of the work is maintaining the internal spotlight, the spotlight within. You know, we're constantly outward facing creatures. We're doing things. We're interacting with other people. We're engaged with work in the physical, and at the same time, I keep the spotlight internal. So I'm always paying attention to how I'm engaging with the thing that's in front of me, as well as the internal processes that are going on at the same time.
While you do that.
While I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And, you're not going to, there are the things that I am aware of, and there are the things that I'm unaware of. And there's always going to be things that I'm unaware of. But I'm paying attention. Things will come up. Will show up in a way in which, there's a little anxiety. There's a little thing. I'm doing this, and here's this other thought, this other, I'm constantly paying attention to where I'm at physiologically. Where's my heart rate? Where's my breath? What am I thinking about? Am I engaged in this thing, or am I off in the distance? Is this something I need to be engaged with? Do I need to bring myself back? I'm doing that throughout the day. Whether I'm working or working at resting or working at playing. I have an interesting story of how I really kind of processed through this over the course of a year. So after my divorce, I went through a period of I took a whole year off, of dating, and really became kind of a hermit. I did the things that I had to do: coaching, work, parenting, but outside of that, I did very little social time. I stayed home, I journaled, I meditated. I was focusing on healing from divorce. Divorce is a really difficult thing to go through. It's a multi-year process to really move through because it's such a train wreck to go through it. Whether you go through a good divorce or a bad divorce, it's hard no matter what. And during that time it was a time in which I was very focused on connecting. So I was doing a lot of breath work, a lot of meditation, journaling, talking to source. Whether you call it God, spirit, sometimes I like to call it SpongeBob SquarePants, just to remind myself not to take it so seriously. And during that time, I do a lot of work where I do my breath work. I get to that state of neutral, and then I ask for guidance. What am I supposed to be doing right now? And the feedback I got in this time was to go sit on a hammock in my backyard. And it was such an interesting process because I grew up with the word lazy being a negative term. And so anytime I'd find myself sitting and resting and being lazy, there was immediately this jackhammer that's like, you got to go up and do something. You need to be productive. You're not being productive enough, right? That emotion of like, you should be sacrificing and suffering. You're not allowed to sit and enjoy. And so anytime I'd sit in that hammock and I'd get to that point where it's like, start to breathe and feel soft, all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're supposed to go do this. There's 3 things on the list that you aren't doing. This was from last week and you still haven't done it. And you feel that impetus to get up and to go do it. And I would feel almost like a hand on my chest, just pushing me back saying, no, this is where you're supposed to be. Right. That was the guidance. And you're supposed to be lazy.
You know what that looks like? The voices you're talking about of you're supposed to be doing this and that. For me, it looks like you're young. Like, these are your years. These are like your prime years. Like, go do this. Like, be active. Those are the ways that I like.
Yeah. Well, and those are true. they're not wrong. Yeah. Right. Like you're in your 30s. Like these are the most active years of your life. Mm-hmm. For me, it was a voice that went back to my childhood. Mm-hmm. Because that was something that was, and it's not something I would say negatively about my father, but this was a way that my father talked that I held on to, and I held on to in this very particular way. But an interesting thing happened. I would stay on that hammock and I would sometimes it would keep me there for an hour or two. And I would breathe, I'd have my journal out, I'd write. And it was work to stay there because it wasn't comfortable. Mm. It wasn't an enjoyable process, but I was doing it because that was what I felt guided to do. And an interesting thing happened through going through that process. And that process took months. It wasn't like every day. It wasn't, it would be days out of the week, but it felt like a year of my life was on that hammock is what it felt like. But when I would get to the point, serious, it was hard. It was not an easy thing. There's a level in which you're out on a hammock and you're enjoying it. And it's like, oh, this is great. And it's like, it feels miserable. It does not feel comfortable.
It feels relatable. That's why I chuckled.
Yeah. So, but there was an interesting thing that happened is that by doing the work, staying with it, I would continue to feel myself sink a little deeper and feel where one of the things I was actively doing was paying attention to the emotions that were coming up, or what was it that I was feeling that made me want to get up and go? Internal judgment, unworthiness, you're not good enough. insecurity. Like those are all things that that kind of stimulate us to go do things, but not always do things with purpose. Sometimes it's busy work, be busy, but not productive. I don't want to necessarily just be busy for the sake of busy. I want to work smarter, not harder. So to go out and be busy, but to produce nothing didn't make any sense, especially if it came at the expense of the rest and restore, which I absolutely needed in order to do work better. So the interesting thing that happened is I'd surrender, unworthiness, judgment, frustration, insecurity. And I'd feel myself getting to this place where I felt deeper, more neutral, not really attached to work or being where I was, maybe a little bit more calm and enjoyment of just like being able to hear the birds in nature, considering that's where I was. And then the next thing I was inspiration. The messages I'd get of being able to see all the potentials that were in front of me and the work that was required to lead to those potentials. And like the next 5 to 10 years of my life came from that. And it was work. There was a lot of work that came in after that, but it was working smarter, not harder. It was less busy work. It was more specific work. And when the work was done, it got to move on. And then I got to be to a state of rest. Coming back to how I talked about earlier with, if we're busy all the time and we don't rest and restore, then our busyness, the productivity of our busyness degrades to where we are producing less quality of work simply because we're not working on the rest and restore, which actually is an important quality to our work.
But that what you're saying here, I think that you could only really like delineate the differences between is if what you were saying before is like you're doing this work, but you're also doing the work by observing yourself in a way. And I think that where the people that I interact with on a day-to-day, average people, like on average, I don't know if they can actually delineate that to be able to say, I'm wasting my time here, yet I am grinding, versus I'm not doing so much work and yet I'm being extremely productive. Right? And so I think that is like, it comes from the wisdom of observing ourselves throughout it all.
Yep.
And that would be whether you're in the 9 to 5 or whether you're in the rest and sleeping like time frames. I don't think there's any other trick than really that.
Well, minus the what it actually will look like for you. It might look like
The difference
1 to 2 years on a hammock, right? Or it might be a 5-minute practice first thing in the morning. Like what it looks like for somebody to be the observer takes work.
Mm-hmm.
Like it takes work that is productive, but it doesn't necessarily look productive because it's not something that's being not producing anything on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
What it's producing is things on the inside, which will ultimately lead to what produce things that are produced on the outside.
Yeah.
And the thing I was going to attach to the concept of active rest that is a form of work, makes the actual work more productive. I work less, but what I do produces more. That 1 to 2 years on a hammock was something that I needed because I was in my 40s at the time and I had not done that in my life prior. And so it required a lot of time because I had a backlog of rest and restore that was not there and that's what it took for me to get underneath it. That's a large chunk of time. I don't necessarily think that that's required for everybody. think that was something specific for me. But the concept, I think, is important. If we are not engaging with the work of our rest, which I think includes how we move our body, how we breathe, how we work with our emotional system, because our emotional system needs work because it's constantly being pushed into states in fight or flight and rest and restore. And we tend to stay in this one area. So we have to work in order to get to rest and restore. And that builds up over time. The longer we go not doing that means at some point we have to invest a lot more time in order to get the benefit of it. But ultimately, what that work is developing that internal spotlight, that ability to be an observer of ourselves, and incredibly beneficial, because then we do get to see, a lot of people are incredibly busy. I know people who have tremendous work ethics, but they run around like a chicken with their head cut off, and they're constantly stressed out to the point where they're doing, like they're working really hard, but they're sacrificing quality in their work because there is no ability to rest and restore.
Yeah, and I think that reminds me of actually the opposite of what you just said would also mean that, and this is what I read in the Universal Law, or the book that you gave me, this short book. I forget the title of it, but
I mean, is that discovered the secrets to the universe?
Yeah. Where wise men can always have what it is perceived as infinite energy, even though they're extremely busy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the opposite of this, where it's like this thing that you painted was like they could be incredibly busy all the time with work. Yet they could be not producing like much and they're just tiring themselves out. Or what is the other one where they could be extremely busy and they could actually have a lot more energy still to give because they're able to see themselves internally. They're able to navigate their whole self.
Yeah.
In the restfulness of work or active part of work.
And there's an interesting thing of the job that I might be working on right now by having a good sense of internal observation.
Yeah.
Notice, being aware of, I can only put so much effort into this job at a time and still do it well. Maybe it's 15 minutes. And so instead of spending an hour and a half on it to get 15 minutes of quality work, I spend 15 minutes on it and then I move on. And then I go to the next thing. And the next thing is different from this enough that it engages a different part of my brain. It's coming back to what we talked about at the beginning. And even though it's still work, but because it's different work, I have the ability to put in 10, 15, 30 minutes into this that's different. And maybe in between, I give myself a minute to 5 minutes of like getting up, doing some movement, doing some breath work. So I have some rest built in.
Yeah.
But also just the fact that these two jobs are so distinctly different that I'm getting rest from one by doing the other. And I can kind of go through my day and I can knock off a lot of jobs and I can actually be very, very productive through my day, having rest built into it. And I can get a hell of a lot more done in my day than just grinding on one thing for a long period of time. I find doing physical labor to be very restful, in ways,
Mm-hmm.
right? In ways, obviously physically not restful, but other ways very, mentally restful, emotionally restful. So I can go from doing, highly mentally stimulating and, just requires a lot of effort work. And then I can set that to the side and I can go outside and just move dirt for an hour or two, exhaust myself, and then come back and then do this even more and feel incredibly restful.
Yeah.
And feel really good and productive at the end of the day. Now always in my day, I make sure that I have time where I'm doing movement, I'm doing breath work along the way because I work to maintain rest and restore throughout the day. It's not something I save for the beginning and the end. I do it throughout the day as needed, and paying attention. Some days this might be 5 minutes. Yesterday I was able to get 30 minutes out, but today I'm tired. I'm a little more tired. I'm a little more fatigued. It's not really interesting to me. So maybe I only give it 5 minutes and I got to move on to something else. There's a flexibility, again, that being able to be playful with it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of this worked for me because I have a lifestyle and a work that is very fluid, and I can move I can set things to the side unless I'm working with a client. I can move from one thing to another thing seamlessly. Not everybody has that benefit in how their life is built.
I want to talk about that, the lifestyle. I think this might have originated from a conversation where I think I've mentioned this to you like multiple times now, where I read about the people of Mayan culture, where they would go and work only for X amount of time in the year and really just gather whatever that was needed for them to survive the rest of the year. So they would go to the cities, do the job, earn whatever is necessary for the entire year. They would retreat back to their communal living, let's maybe call it country or village. Most likely it read like to me that that's probably where they were not going to earn. So they would have to go somewhere in the city to earn, but then come back. This is where their family would be, all of that. And they would basically retreat for the rest of the year to then live that life. Now, I think that there's a version of that still exists in parts of the world today, obviously. But I want to know if you think ideologies of that or principles of that or notions of that is related to what we're talking about here, and whether it's even important or not. I think there is a link to it, because what you're saying, where I can rest for 5 minutes in between these two jobs that I'm doing and things like that, we're working that in. We're actually in this society where we live, where it's, for the most part, it sounds absurd to be like, I'm only gonna work for 3 months of the year, and for enough to just gather for the rest of the year, and then we'll see what happens next year. Although people might still live like that, like contractors, freelancers, things like that. Where I think my expectations often through my job is that I'm churning out stuff constantly, like year on out. Like, of course, it's like time off and things like that, but it's like, that's for like 2 weeks out of 53 weeks of the year.
Do you love what you do?
No. Yeah.
So that's probably the bigger question.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, it's like, we have our ways to justify or compartmentalize. I do both. It's like, oh, this could do this. So then on the other side of outside of those time frames, I get to do things that I love.
So here's a thought. You should love what you do. Even if
that sounds binary.
Even if you don't.
Oh yeah.
And if you don't love what you do, then I would say you should figure out how to love what you do. Because there's a way, right? There are people who are we come in so many different types. There are people who are born into this world who are just productive. And they're really, really naturally good at it. They're naturally good at it in a way in which it is play to them. They're grinding and producing things at a rate that's just insane to everybody else. But they love what they do, and it's part of what makes them good at it, is they love it. They're just geared towards doing work. They can sit, knock out things for hours at a time. Not that I promote sitting for hours at a time, but there are people who are just geared that way. I'm not geared that way. That's not how I was made. But because people are like that, I know that the idea of work that's just grinding out 80 hours a week kind of work, that there are people who are naturally inclined to be that way, means that that's not necessarily wrong. It's not the wrong way to do it. There's also people who are incredibly talented and are able to produce a tremendous amount with just a little bit of effort. Artists are a good example of that, right? They can sit down for 30 minutes and they can produce something that pays them for the next 10 years, right? And then they can get away with doing very little with the rest of their time.
This is one side of the story, though, right?
Right. Well, I'm kind of getting to it. I'm giving two extremes of the spectrum to go, well, which one's the right way to be?
Yeah.
Well, they both are.
Yeah.
Which means that we get to fit somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, where do we fit? And how do we fit? Coming back to the idea that work is sacrifice. There's no joy, there's no love, there's no play if work is just purely sacrifice. If it's, I have to. That is a.
That's easy to not find joy in.
It's easy to find.
Yeah.
It's easy that it's easy. Not only is it easy to not find joy in it, it's easy to apply a level of suffering on top of what it already is. Like, it already is hard, and then we suffer on top of it.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to avoid, not just for myself, but for other people. Now, I also think that there's people who have tough lives and have really hard jobs that are really hard to love, but they can find ways to love it. The fact that it puts food on the table for my family, the fact that I can put my kids through school, are reasons that I show up and love my job and do my job well. And I know people who do that, and they have some of the toughest, most difficult jobs in the world, jobs that I would not take.
So this is basically, you're talking about like the power of imagination. It's like, that's the gift that we have, and it's the perspective, the lens through which we look at.
Perspective, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say it's more perspective than imagination, because I don't think it takes imagination. Imagination feels like a little fantasy. I think it's perspective that's actually built on things that are very true and real. But if our perspective is, well, so you hear me talk about we're comfort-seeking creatures. Like, that's just naturally how we are. Which means we move away from things that are uncomfortable. Work is something that is uncomfortable. It's part of the reason we have this association with it. But there are things that we need that actually fulfill us, make us whole, make us grow, make us better, that are uncomfortable and require us to lean into discomfort as opposed to comfort. That's perspective, right? The perspective I have of the thing is going to be whether I'm going
to do it anyways.
I'm going to do it anyways. So, I played college basketball. To get to the, I'm 5, well, now I'm 5'9", but I was 5'10". I've shrunken a little bit. I was a 5'10", small guard trying to play at a collegiate level. I had to work incredibly hard in order to develop a skill level that allowed me to compete with people who are better athletes than me, bigger, stronger, faster, all the things. If I didn't love the game, I would not have put in the work. But and there are days where I didn't want to put in the work, and yet I showed up anyways. That all has to do with like perspective, mindset, viewpoints, how we understand the world, how we see things for how they are, and how we make choices and say, I'm not doing this because I have to. I'm not doing it because I'm being made to. I'm not doing it because it's something that goes against my will or my desires. I'm doing this in spite of the fact that may rather be doing that thing over there. I'd rather go sit in that hammock and just rest. But I'm doing this because I know that the outcome is going to be fulfilling. It's going to lead to a better version of me. It's going to lead to something that's going to benefit others. And that by itself means that I engage in this thing at a level of love, right? And it's not even a convincing. If I if I'm doing something that is not beneficial for others, is not leading to these other things, then that should be a wake-up call that maybe when I'm doing, I should be doing something else. Or I need to reevaluate my mindset, how I'm perceiving things in order to shift to where I can love what I'm doing.
See, for me, I think that's an active work in and itself. This last thing that you said.
Yeah.
Of reevaluating, reshifting the mindset, having to remind myself why I'm doing something, or gaining the answer of why I'm doing something if it has changed, like periodically. That I interpret as struggle, my internal struggle.
Yeah.
And I think the type of work that I do, honestly, like that struggle, even that comes from just, what's the word? It's a privilege. Because I know people they can't even think like that.
Yeah.
Where they're like, yo, whatever it is, I got to pay the bills for today. Yeah. So I recognize the privilege, and yet I struggle and put myself through that. And that's my human experience. And it's also real, but I mean, I have to take it with a grain of salt.
Well, I mean, I think it's important to recognize our privilege. The idea that I can talk about lifestyle and work and play in the way I do is because I have a tremendous amount of privilege in my life.
Yeah.
No doubt about that. The struggle part is there is a real fight that's going on internally. And I don't think it needs to be, man, I can bring up the word privilege and make myself feel I can make myself feel guilty. I can make myself feel a lot like unworthy, right? Like I have all these things, I have all these things that are just
harsh sometimes even.
Like, it can be very harsh.
Shut up. Yeah.
And so what is the struggle? What is the fight? The fight is something that we're having within ourselves. Something I was talking with a client with just over the past week, a few clients actually, is coming back to the being in the hammock and feeling that pull to need to go do something. Where I was describing this to a client is we can get into that moment of where we're feeling really good. It's like, oh, life is okay. And then along comes this hammer and we just hit ourselves in the head. It's like, no, you're not allowed to feel that way.
That's the struggle. That's
it. So it's a fight that's within ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very human fight. I think that everybody has that internal struggle. And I think that is unrelated to this concept of privilege. We are privileged what we're privileged in is that we actually have the opportunity to look at it the way we do. And that's a privilege on a lot of different levels. There's a cognitive privilege. If I was born with a lower IQ, I may not have the cognitive ability to even think on these types of levels. If I was born into abject poverty, I may not have the time to think about these things because I got 3 jobs that are constantly taking my attention. I have the privilege of meeting teachers and being introduced to the concept of this work that not everybody even gets. So there's a lot of layers of privilege into why I get to be where I'm at. I I think that is separate. I think the fact that we all have an internal struggle is something that is human, that is very common, and is a little bit separate from that privilege. So if that privilege is being brought in as a part of the bludgeon, right? Then it's
Right.
like, oh, that's a different conversation. So what is it that is preventing me from enjoying this moment in a, client this morning who talked about just this idea of, it's a little bit of the grass is always greener on the other side. So, and I like to talk about sunsets and, sunsets being a moment in time.
Yeah.
That fade very, very quickly, right? But we want to hold on to it longer. It really is just a moment in time.
Yeah.
Getting three thoughts into one, so I need to back up and reorient where I was at the beginning of all that. There is beauty all around us to be witnessed, observed, no matter where you are. The fact that we don't always see that beauty is a part of that internal struggle. And I like that as a maybe like an awareness to pay attention to for when I am feeling this, when I have this going on, what it's happening is there's that part of me that does not want to notice the beautiful sunset that's right in front of me, and that wants to see things for less than and for where I'm not doing enough.
So it sounds like you're almost saying this to think from a perspective that although sunsets are like fleeting moments, knowing either that there's always sunset somewhere, even though we might not be actually, it might be like 2:00, or knowing that there's going to be a sunset like this evening. It's like having that kind of perspective is could be a gift in those moments, because everything is a fleeting moment. I mean, like if we're in that moment of struggle, just having that perspective that this too shall pass.
Yeah.
Right. And then vice versa. I mean, you're in this moment of ecstasy. So, well, this too.
Well, I think what I'm saying, like every moment has the potential to be a moment of ecstasy.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that because every moment should be.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying I want to be in a permanent state of ecstasy. That would not be an ideal situation.
Yeah.
But the fact that every moment has that potential means that every moment I can be paying attention to how I am oriented to the world and seeing what is it that I'm paying attention to. Am I paying attention to the beauty and ecstasy of life in a way that makes me feel gratitude for even being a part of it? Or am I paying attention to all the ways in which the state of matter are breaking down around me?
Which is also true. I mean,
which is also true.
Yeah.
So this brings up to the point of both of these sides of ourselves are actually really important.
Yeah.
I don't want to move into one side at the expense. The fight is there for a reason, because there are moments in which we should be enjoying the beauty, and there are moments in which we should be working. And being able to tell the difference between the two is important, because if I'm finding myself in a state of busyness, not being very productive, then should I be over here? And if I find myself finding beauty in everything at the expense when I should be actually leaning into discomfort and doing some work, then that's not ideal either. So the fight is really just a conversation. And it's a conversation of, if I'm seeing a sunset, but yet I have a list of 3 things that I need to be working on right now, 3 or more that I need to be working on, that's just a signal of take a breath and observe. What am I supposed to be working on? That's where I come in and I ask my guidance. Am I supposed to be lazy? Am I supposed to stay in the hammock? Or am I supposed to get up and go do some work? Because sometimes the answer is go do some work.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's no, you need to stay where you're at. And generally, whatever answer that I get that comes from my guidance is an uncomfortable answer. But it's not that one is the right one and one is the wrong. So there's a reason this is an internal struggle that everybody has, is because I think that's an important struggle. The idea that I'm going to come back to the idea of the sunset being a fleeting moment and then connecting that to entropy. The present moment is decaying, right?
As we speak.
The state of matter decays over time. So we can't be satisfied with the moment we're in. So if we're watching that sunset and basking in the glory of it, it is a moment, and that moment is degrading immediately after, which means we should be constantly moving on to the next thing. There is an internal push to always move forward into the next thing, because we can't stay in one place. To stay in one place, to try to enjoy that sunset unendingly harms us, because it means we are no longer growing forward as thing, and whatever it was is now breaking down and no longer is what we thought it was. So, that struggle, that fight is a constant struggle and fight, which comes back to why, I'm working 24 hours a day, because I'm always paying attention to that.
This is I don't know why I'm thinking about this, but this whole goal that we're going to document this, as this will be a time set.
Mm-hmm.
And it's honestly, next week we're going to be no, we don't believe in any of this, perhaps. Because it's literally a fleeting moment. It's kind of a joke, and yet it's true.
Yeah.
It's very true. It's so it just says to the lightness, how we are to take this lightly. I want to ask you something. So this thing that I talked to you about, of work for 3 months and then just rest,
mm-hmm.
this ideology, if you had a choice to magic wand, you can make that happen, would you choose that?
I think the premise is not complete. The idea that I don't know. So you're talking about work.
No,
that is
yeah.
That is very specific to producing an income that I can then live off of.
Year.
But we're not going in and saying, well, what am I actually doing during that 9 months? Am I not working? Or is it just different? Is work just going to look different over that 9 months?
Yeah, exactly.
And then maybe I'm actually working just as hard or harder.
Yeah.
Because I might be able to do 3 months of manual labor. Doesn't take a whole lot of my time. It's actually easy for me to do, but I just got to grind for 3 months. And then I go 9 months and I'm building latrines. I'm building, toilets. I'm building houses. I love it. I'm not getting paid for it, but it's what I do. But I'm actually working a lot harder.
Yeah.
So the idea that I'm only working 3 months and I'm not working the other nights, I don't think is accurate.
Love it. I love that so much, because when I first read that, of course, my brain wanted to gravitate towards something that was, because it's so different from the society that I've grown up in. I was like, whoa, this is so fascinating, because I am in the state of awe and just taking in the grass is always greener on the other side. Well, this was in the past. But really, it totally misses on the premise of I have no idea what these communities of people did while they were working and while they were not working. Yeah.
I mean, those communities still had kids.
No,
kids had been raised.
No way they were just oh yeah, on a hammock for the next 9. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe they had real dangers that they actively had to work towards every single night or day and things like that.
I mean, if anything,
it's not you're living in modernity.
I'm going to assume that they're taking all that income from 3 months and applying that into things that actually make their home more productive in general. Yeah. So I would imagine that the work that you would see if you actually went and investigated would actually be more productive work. Is just, again, this is part of our definition of work, I think, is, I brought in productivity. I think if we defined work based on how society looked at it, society would look at, what are you earning? And that would be the definition of work.
Yeah.
It depends on how much you make. It qualifies for how much you work. And I just don't agree.
I think,
agree with that.
and I think that's there's level of difference in definition of jobs too. Like the way you describe what a job could be, but it's like in society it could be like, oh no, but like you're 9 to 5, like that. They're terming that as the job, and that's constant.
Well, but I would still count that as the same as the way I described it, because if that is your job, that is not you. That is the thing that you have to check off. Is you don't own it. It's not yours. You're going and doing it. You're doing it in order to collect the paycheck. It's a task that you show up to, and it's your 9 to 5 job.
Yeah,
but it's not your work.
Yeah. Thank you. I changed my mind. I think what I mean to say is actually people themselves identifying with that.
Yeah.
And thatness, even though what you're saying is what may be happening, I think in general, that is oftentimes what's happening. People associate that as this is where my identity is tied to. This is where my fulfillment is tied to. And if there's a risk to any of that, then all of a sudden the whole avalanche comes to be.
I definitely
so from that point of view, it's not like a job that's just like, this is job and then it's done. What am I supposed to? Because they are thinking this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah. It's
the
way people identify with their jobs, I feel is tough. Like that's
extremely tough, man. Like
it's soul sucking because we are so much more than that. We should be so much more. I mean, we should be somewhat identified with the job that we do. Like I think that I don't think we should not, but
But just the fact that people think like we do this. I'm like, we? Like, what are you talking about? We? Like, you've been there for a month. How is it a we already? I want to talk about, I think we touched on this, but let's talk about boredom.
Okay.
Because there's a boredom thing that's just like, I just want to use that terminology with laziness, with hammocks, all of that. But I also want to shed some highlight on how boredom is valuable, and it's actually a skill that we should value, just like productivity is valued. Do you think boredom here, the way we're talking about, is the same thing as laziness?
No.
Yeah, but it could feel like it.
Well, I mean, there's definitely so. No, I don't think I do. I'm thinking when I see a kid get bored, it's not because they're being lazy. It's because they actually want to be engaged in something and they're not. And
I love that. I love that differentiation.
Yeah. Like there's a desire, but there's
it's actually the opposite.
It's the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it's because like laziness, like one of the lessons I got being on that hammock was how to actually enjoy being lazy. Like to get to the point where it didn't feel like a struggle, where I wasn't internally beating myself up every moment that I was laying there, which is not restful.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're sitting there in a state of rest, but you're not actually resting, like it's not rest.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there is a state of boredom that you have to work through in order to get to laziness, and then that laziness being something that you get to literally bask in and enjoy. To sit by a beach, like, we have people go on vacations to places in which they cannot possibly work so that they can enjoy being lazy, because they can't do anything else but be lazy there. But they can't be lazy anywhere else, right? They have to go hundreds of miles to a beach.
That symbolizes that, or like it opens up to this door.
Right.
Yeah.
So the boredom was something I had to work through, and because boredom is actually very active, it wants something. It wants to be actively doing something. It just doesn't know what to do.
Yeah. So I'm glad that we're talking about this, because I think it touches on laziness. It touches on maybe even passive resting, but there's nuances. It's different entirely from if you look at the nuances.
And I would say like boredom is a good, like that needs to be a light bulb of I need to check in, because that's going to be, is there something I'm supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
Or am I supposed to be doing nothing? But if I'm bored, I'm not doing either of those things. I'm kind of in a state in between.
What were the two things? Am I supposed to
I'm supposed to be doing something, or I'm supposed to be doing nothing at all.
I see. Right.
Right.
So that's like a gateway almost.
It's a gateway.
It's like
I'm feeling
yeah.
bored. Okay. Well, what am I supposed to be doing right now?
Yeah.
And then
it's kind of clear.
Then it's clear. Well, I mean, it's clear. So being able to follow your guidance takes practice too, because it's not always easy. And partly because being in a state where you can hear guidance means being deep enough emotionally that you can tell the difference between what is guidance and what is your ego's desire.
Yes.
So there's some differentiation that takes practice. It took me at least 8 years to be able to get relatively good at being able to tell the difference. Not that, an occasion, we'll just say like, at first it's like, 4 out of 10 times, of asking, I get a deep, neutral place answer and response that is coming from guidance. And 6 out of 10 times, it's really my ego.
That's high, man. You're batting high. That's great.
Well,
come on, man. Like,
I think I've gotten better than that since then.
I'm sure. Yeah.
When I was first started, it was like, it was 99% ego all the time.
I was literally about to say, like, I think actually going back to the concept of struggle, I think when I start with this observing myself work, it's the muddy waters there oftentimes is very defeating. And that's whether it's ego or guidance, just not being able to delineate or recognize, oftentimes leaves me with just defeat and be like, okay, that's it. I'm throwing in the towel next time. But that is the struggle, and that is the part to get to learn more about yourself. And that's the part of that's the work.
So interesting thing with the guidance, following guidance takes work too.
Yeah.
Because number one, it takes trust. And trust is not an easy thing. And part of that trust is sometimes you're going to follow your guidance and you're actually, it's your ego, not your guidance. And so you have to trust that even when that happens, that's supposed to happen. Because when you hear something clearly, yes, I'm supposed to do that, no to that, yes to that, then you have to take the steps forward to go do that thing.
The action is required.
The action is required.
Yeah.
And that part is challenging. But this was something that I actually found this to be it brought ease to the struggle to get to the point where I could get clear messages of yes, this, no to that. Because once I got there, all of the BS conversation that goes around, like this is what you should, all the should be doings and all the you're not doing enough, just go away when I engage and act on the thing that I've been told to go do. And because I can just say that, I'm trusting that this is the path I'm supposed to be following, and I'm going to go it, whether it's the path I wanted to take or not, whether I enjoy this or not. And letting all that other emotional conversation that was attached to it go away. I engage in this differently. And it feels better because I'm not bringing all the baggage with. There's something about that just lets leave the bags at the door and walk through the door.
Yeah.
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 And then it's like whatever the outcomes come from this are the outcomes that are supposed to be. So I'm going to be okay living with those outcomes, even if those outcomes aren't necessarily the most desirable outcomes. Because sometimes we get less than desirable outcomes, and those are actually really good outcomes. Mm-hmm. We just don't know it yet. We don't know it until more time goes by and we go back and go, oh, that's what I didn't like that at the time, but man, I'm so glad it happened that way because now I get it.
Yeah.
Right. We don't necessarily get it when we're walking through the door. This is why we're supposed to go do the arduous, difficult thing that doesn't feel very good in the moment. But later on, it's like, oh, now I get it. I can't know it when I walk through the door. I have to walk through the door to get to the other side of it. That is something that's helped me love the work, even when the work is not something that I necessarily love doing.
Well, I think, so this is what I was thinking about this, where, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you say that, when we talk about this thing, difficult things, pursuing the difficult things, despite whether that's joyful or not, like almost like you even bringing like masochistic nature and things like that, right? But you're not saying like, that's it, just push for the difficult things. I think you're just saying when, if required,
yeah,
like you want to do that, you want to put in the action towards doing that. But I think I want to just make sure that we're clear, like in a way that you're not just saying like, hey, you see two paths, one is easy, one difficult.
No, I'm not
pick
saying
the difficult shit.
No. I'm saying ask for guidance.
Yeah.
And if you don't get clear answers, then there's work that you can do.
Yeah.
Meditation, breath work, journaling, movement. A practice of those things will get you better at asking and get you better at hearing the answers.
Yeah.
When I come to the fork in the road, it's a great, like, this is really pretty much how the work is described. You come to a fork in the road and you ask for guidance. Which way do I go? Do I go this way? Yes or no? Do I go this way? Yes or no? The answer that I get is, when it comes clear. Now, there's a lot more to this. There's so much more to this because early on in the work, there's so much emotional attachment. You have to do layers of work to get underneath it. So I might do some breath work and I'm like, oh, I feel neutral. And I come back and ask the question. And then I ask and I get a yes. And I feel oh, good. That's the answer I wanted to have. It's like, well, that wasn't a neutral response to that answer. That wasn't it. And so I have to go back and do some more work and then come back and ask the question again. Or it might be, no, you get to go, go do the hard thing. And it's like, oh man,
still not neutral.
There's an emotional attachment to the answer. And I'm like, no, I'm not done. I have to be able to get to a point where whatever it is, I don't have an attachment to it. Whether it's the hard thing or the easy thing, I am emotionally a little bit separate from it.
This is what it sounded like when you were first earlier describing too, where you were saying getting the guidance, that's good, but then acting on guidance is equally difficult. But you were saying that because you have this level of trust, you are now going into it, like whether it's going to be easy or hard, it's okay. I'm supposed to go through this path. And it's not like, oh, I'm supposed to go to this path, or, oh, I'm supposed to go to this path. It's like, I'm supposed to go to this path.
It feels purposeful.
Yeah.
I feel like I am doing something with purpose. I think we talked about this in like one of the first episodes. Meaning and purpose. The things that I think that bring the most level of suffering in life are lack of meaning and lack of meaning and purpose. If what I'm doing, I'm busy, but I'm not productive in a way that it feels meaningful or purposeful. I don't feel like I'm contributing to something bigger for myself or for others. I'm just grudging along for the sake of grudging along. There's a lot of work and effort, and then there's suffering on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that suffering comes from lack of meaning and lack of purpose.
Yeah.
Now, I do my work and I have purpose, and my purpose tells me to go do that work. All of a sudden that work feels different. Might be just as hard, but it feels purposeful. And there's something in that intrinsically that feels good. It feels right. Like that's what I'm supposed to do. even if it hurts, even if it's a little painful, or even if it feels lazy and unproductive, which also can feel hurtful. Doesn't always feel good to go rest. I want to be productive sometimes. This is hard to do. This is not an easy state to attain all the time. But if I'm pushed to it with purpose, there's the quality in which I like. There's an ease that comes with it. There's definitely no less suffering that comes as a consequence of it.
Yeah.
It's one thing to be in pain in life. It's another thing to suffer on top of that pain.
Right. I think this is a really good conversation about work, but then we also actually really molded it into doing the work. I think this is a good space to also bring in the three axis like analogy that I talked to you about. I might need help because it's been a while since I've actually thought about this and revisited it. But it's this notion that you're looking at when evaluating concepts of life, meaningful, purposeful, and things like that. It's like you have x-axis, y-axis, and then the z-axis. On x-axis, you have, you're evaluating knowledge, so you can be not knowledgeable in something, and then, or you could be the most knowledgeable in something. So that's x-axis. Y-axis is, I'm forgetting exactly this specific one, but it's something to do with like maybe action. It's like you're doing something, or you're not doing something, or you're doing the most. Like I'm churning out so much work, or I'm just being lazy maybe. So x-axis, y-axis, and then the z-axis, which would be like meaning or fulfillment, or even faith. I think it was like trust or faith, something like that, where it's like there's this belief where you either are believing in doing something, or you're not believing in doing something. Like, I don't believe in this. Do you find this meaningful or not? And it's something where like, I'm supposed to be doing this, or I believe in this so much that I know I'm supposed to be doing this. I think that's what you were talking about here, where it's like, if you got the guidance, whatever that is, you're on that, in that z-axis, you're on the higher level where it's like, this is what I'm guided to do. And for me, it was really helpful to look at it from these axes, because I then got to reflect on the past 30 years of my life. And there were moments in time where really I was leaning more towards one axis versus the other. Maybe I'm working on two axes, but never all three axes, right? And so here you can think of like where your fulfillment of life could come from when you're working, when you're at the far end of all axes, where you're gaining knowledge throughout something, you're actively working on something, effort, and you're guided to the most. And if you're at that level is when you could potentially feel fulfilled with life. I think that is a lot of the stuff that we talked about today. And I wanted to bring that in here as well. And I might try to put in like a visual or something like that.
I like that. Can I add another parameter, or maybe see if another parameter might fit?
Yeah.
I feel like time. I think about
time as in like lifetime,
just over time. Think of it like, effort over time.
Right.
Because I like to feel productive at the end of every day, which means that there needs to be things that I put, going to, effort.
Yeah.
I don't know how much the intelligence part or the knowledge part is relevant, because it has a relevance, but definitely effort into something of meaning, with some purpose over time. If there's days, it's rainy out, you can't go outside. I look at my device, I got like 3,000 steps. I haven't done much because it's just a day. I can get a workout in, and I can feel some level of productivity at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Just from that one little thing. Or I have a day where it's like I wake up early and I'm just knocking things out. I go to bed late. I'm exhausted. It's like, what a busy day. Feels good. I felt productive. And there's different quality, like, on a day-to-day basis, I want to feel some level of, I was productive with my day. I feel like I got something, I did something good with my day. It was a purposeful day. You add that up over time, each of those days over time. And that is like, the more days that you have meaningful, purposeful effort, over time, you are going to experience a lot more meaning and purpose than less of those days. So there is a component of, if I have one great day, I'm not going to feel like I'm the most meaningful, purposeful person in the that's ever existed. But I one of the things I think about on a regular basis is my last breath on the planet.
Yeah.
And being able to breathe, knowing it's my last breath, and that breath to be a breath of just pure surrender. And pure surrender meaning I can look back on the totality of my life, which includes the highly productive, purposeful days and the lowly productive, purposeful days. And all of it, I can go, man, I have very little regret. I live the best life I possibly can, and I'm ready to go. Right, I'm ready to meet God, whatever it is I'm going to meet. That ultimately is what I'm working towards. And how do I work towards that if I'm not practicing that with every breath I'm taking now? Because every breath has the potential to be my last breath. So there's a quality in which, over time, all of that, that accumulation of living and doing things of meaning and purpose, putting in effort, being productive means that, what does being productive means is like you're actually going to see the results, the fruits of your labor over time. And the more time that you've been doing it, the greater the fruits of your labor. So I feel like time needs to be a relevant part.
Definitely.
It's one thing to look back on your life at 30. It's another thing when you're 50 and another thing when you're 70.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be the same at each of those stages.
No, and it's going to have an accumulative effect, one way or the other, for sure. Yeah. I think that goes with like how we move and things like that. Like you talk about, it's like if you want to move, then you got to move now, and it's going to have that cumulative effect. And like logically that makes sense, but it also revolves in all of these other like concepts as well of like effort, knowledge, or doing something that you're supposed to be doing. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm glad you made it all the way to the end. Thank you for watching. If you really enjoyed it, comment on the video below, like, and also share it with one of your best friends. Thanks again. This is Smith, tuning out of TAOTalks.